Today we're going to be looking at some of the aspects of defilement and the role of the priest and the times when they're not able to fully participate. Leviticus 22:1. And the Lord said to Moses, 22:2. Say to Aaron and his sons that they shall stay away from the holy things which the Israelites dedicate to me, that they may not profane my holy name. I am the Lord. 22:3. Tell them, any one of your offspring throughout your generations who goes to the holy things which the Israelites dedicate to the Lord, when he is unclean, that priest shall be cut off from my presence and excluded from the sanctuary. I am the Lord. There are many different rules when it comes to clean and unclean, and we're going to see some more later in this chapter. And in the previous chapter, we looked at quite a few regarding interactions with a dead person, that the priests were not allowed to be in the presence of a dead person, and it got even more strict for the high priest. But what to do when something like that happens, that the priest is defiled? Well, he's not able to do things in the holy place. He can't do anything with any of the holy implements that are within the sanctuary, and is kind of almost like on suspension until that uncleanness is dealt with and he is no longer defiled and is then able to work again. And we have a very severe punishment here, that if he is working well in a defiled state, that God's going to cut him off. He's going to kick him out, and it's going to be a very severe punishment for that regard. For the priest, his essence is his ability to serve God, and if he is removed from that duty, he is effectively no longer a priest, right? So, Leviticus 22:4. No man of the offspring of Aaron who is a leper or has a discharge shall eat of the holy things, the offerings and the showbread, until he is clean. And whoever touches any person or thing made unclean by contact with a corpse or a man who has a discharge of semen. The priest is not above the law. He is bound by the same rules as others. In fact, his position puts him in almost a worse position, in that he is to be more responsible. So we saw previously that there was the leper situation, that the lepers, they would be essentially evicted from the town. They would be outsiders, and if someone was coming near him, they need to call out saying that they're a leper to warn them so that they don't receive the same contagion. And it was just not a great quality of life or high standard of living. It was one of exile. And we saw the same thing with, well, I guess it was a little bit different with the discharge and it being an uncleanness. And the priest, he's probably friends and family with a bunch of other priests, and he has a condition here that makes him unclean, so he can't interact with his own family because he would defile them, and they wouldn't be able to do their job either. So it's probably quite severe. So he needs to get that stuff dealt with. Leviticus 22:5. Or whoever touches any dead, creeping thing by which he may be made unclean, or a man from whom he may acquire uncleanness, whatever it may be. 22:6. The priest who has touched any such thing shall be unclean until evening, and shall not eat of the holy things, unless he has bathed with water. 22:7. When the sun is down, he shall be clean, and afterwards may eat of the holy things, for they are his food. So here we have an example of something that the priest shouldn't touch, a creepy thing. I don't know exactly what that is. It probably is a category that includes multiple things. Maybe it's snakes or crazy bugs or something, that maybe even rodents. I don't know. But the little creepy things. You just, when you hear that, you just know it's something gross and disgusting that you probably wouldn't want to touch unless you are weird like that and are into that kind of stuff. But you do you. Something that you probably don't want to touch, he touched and it defiled him. That's definitely a case. But then we also have the exposure from somebody else that was unclean, making him unclean. And what's he to do? Well, it has the solution right here. He's got to get himself cleaned up. He has to have his bath, get cleaned up, and then he's okay after the day is over. So it's still a day of uncleanness. Even after he cleans and washes up, there's still a temporary lingering effect there. And then he's able to eat the food again, for in the unclean state, he can't eat the holy food. Because there's special food that is made during these sacrifices and during these offerings that the priests get as their portion. And this food, because it was used in these specific holy rites, is considered holy. And it needs to be dealt with in a particular way. You're not allowed to just throw it in the refrigerator for a week and then come back to it in a later date, right? It needs to be eaten in a specific time, and there are other rules and restrictions as well. I guess which portions of the animal are made into this food, and there's some stuff that way. Leviticus 22:8. That which dies of itself or is torn by beasts, he shall not eat, defiling himself with it. I am the Lord. 22:9. The priests therefore shall observe my ordinance, lest they bear sin for it and die thereby. If they profane it, I am the Lord who sanctifies them. So we have seen this line here about eating an animal that dies on its own or torn apart by animals. That was something forbidden. We've seen that multiple times now. And our second part here, we have that the priest has to observe the ordinances. They need to follow the rules as described by God. And in some respects, they're more at risk than other people. For the holy food that is made during these sacrifices, that's part of the offering. That is part of the deal. When the offering is made, it's like a contract. God does his portion, he's going to accept it, and maybe, depending on the type, right? There's some offerings that mask sin, other ones are to build a relationship with God, to give thanksgiving, but the other half of the contract is done by the people, in that, they have to bring the animal in, and then if there's meat that they get from whatever offering, that meat has to be consumed in the methods that are dictated by the Lord in the amount of time that he gives for them to do it. Like, that is the second half of the contract. And it's like, if they don't follow that second half, they do the offering and they sacrifice the animal, and then they get a couple steaks afterwards and they don't eat the steak, well, then that undoes the entire thing. So the priest, as the one running the show in a lot of the cases of these offerings on behalf of the people, they need to do their part. They get their portion from the different offerings or whatever it is, and that's what sustains the priest. And they need to consume that so that they don't, mess up this offering, right? They got to follow the rules. They need to do their thing, because, that farmer over there that's offering that cow or whatever, if this isn't done right, well then why did he offer that animal if it wasn't in the way that it was prescribed by the Lord, right? So Leviticus 22:10. No outsider, not of the family of Aaron, shall eat of the holy thing, which has been offered to God. A sojourner with the priest or a hired servant shall not eat of the holy thing. 22:11. But if a priest buys a slave with his money, the slave may eat of the holy thing, and he also who is born in the priest's house, they may eat of his food. So the portion of food that the priest gets, this is considered the holy food. And part of the rules are that only he can really have it, him and his family, his house, right? It would be kind of weird if he had the offering and then he had to go home and eat a steak in front of his wife and kids. Like, that would be kind of ridiculous. No, God is providing for the priest, and by that, it's also his, his family, his house. And so when he buys a slave, that slave is part of his house, that it is his responsibility to look after this man or woman. And as a result, they can participate in this food. Same with the children, right? But, you got a temporary worker, maybe he's got a guy coming over doing his roof or whatever, some sort of situation that way. That guy can't stay for supper if they're having this holy food for supper, because it is part of the sacrifice, part of the offerings, and this is something that God kind of carved out for Aaron and his sons in the priestly tribe, that that this is how he was going to maintain them so that they would be able to survive and run the show, so to speak, to look after everything that God needs them to look after, to make sure that the offerings and everything, they run smoothly. And of course, Aaron's family, they're off to a rough start. There was 2 sons that have already died from misbehaving, and then there was a lot of other problems that happened that day as well. They didn't eat their offering, and Moses really chewed them out, and that was quite an event as well. So Leviticus 22:12. If a priest's daughter is married to an outsider, not of the priestly tribe, she shall not eat of the offering of the holy things. 22:13. But if a priest's daughter is a widow or divorced, and has no child, and returns to her father's house, as in her youth, she shall eat of her father's food, but no stranger shall eat of it. So what we have here is a heretical priesthood. So the men, generation to generation, will become priests, and they will work in the tabernacle and later on in the temple. They'll look after things. So they are a part of the system, and so they will be able to participate in the food and the offerings and the holy things. But the daughters are a little bit more interesting, because they could be married into different families, and they would effectively leave the house of Aaron to marry into someone else's house, and they would become part of that family. As such, they would no longer be in the priestly house and would no longer be able to participate in the holy food that was provided by the offerings made to the Lord. Now, if that daughter, she gets widowed or divorced, has no kids, she can return back home to her father's house. And because she doesn't have any kids and there's nothing else kind of set up in place, she is brought back into the family, and she is able to participate in the food again. Whether or not she gets married again or not, or leaves, I don't know. Doesn't matter. She can stay there as long as she needs to. And sometimes that's just how it goes. Terrible things can happen, and it can be very tough. Leviticus 22:14. And if a man eats unknowingly of the holy thing which has been offered to God, then he shall add 1/5 of its value to it, and repay that amount to the priest for the holy thing. So somebody has eaten the food by mistake. They've eaten the holy things. Maybe there was someone overworking at the priest's house and snuck a bite of something and got caught in the act, and he has to now pay restitution. So the price of the item plus 1/5, so 20%. So there you go. Don't make that mistake. And now it only mentions this as accidental or as a result of, right? So if it was deliberate, the punishment might be far more severe. Leviticus 22:15. The priest shall not profane the holy things the Israelites offer to the Lord. 22:16. And so cause them by neglect of any essential observance to bear the iniquity when they eat their holy things, for I, the Lord, sanctify them. So we have the idea here of profaning an offering, the holy things. What's going on here? It could be that the priests, they receive some of this meat, some of this nice meat from these different offerings, and maybe they show it off a little bit, and it causes the Israelites to be a little jealous of them, or it kind of sets them off a little bit, and it's not a really good look to have someone who is in the ministry that is essentially flaunting their wealth. It is a terrible look, and it makes people hate the priestly class. You know, in Old Testament or New in the modern churches, like some of the televangelists and stuff that really flaunt the wealth, and it really makes Christianity look bad. And it would be the same thing here for the priests, that, you know, they should probably be taking their food, you know, in subtlety and devouring it with their family behind closed doors, and not really showing off to the world or to the Israelites what exactly is going on there, so that it doesn't harm them, and not be boastful of it and profaning this offering. It's like, oh, look what I earned from this, or whatever. And it's like, it's not really like a wage for what they're doing. I mean, it is in the sense that they do the work and this is like their portion, but it's not like they worked for it, that it is a conventional wage. It's more of like a portion that God has allowed them to have. Leviticus 22:17. And the Lord said to Moses, 22:18, say to Aaron and his sons, and to all the Israelites, whoever of the house of Israel and of the foreigners in Israel brings his offering, whether to pay a vow or as a freewill offering, which is offered to the Lord for a burnt offering. 22:19. That you may be accepted, you shall offer a male without blemish of the young bulls, the sheep, or the goats. 22:20. But you shall not offer anything which has a blemish, for it will not be acceptable for you. Feels like the chapter is changing gears now, and we've moved on to what is acceptable for an offering made to the Lord. And here we're talking about to the Israelites, as well as the foreigners who are dwelling with Israel, that they have the opportunity as well to offer to the Lord. And that's kind of cool. So we're looking at the burnt offerings, and we have the male without blemish, young bull, sheep, or the goats. Blemish, so they can't have any marking on them or be deformed or have any diseases. They need to be healthy and in good shape. We've seen that quite a bit in previous chapters, but it's been a while since we've mentioned it, so we're going to mention it now. God does not want to take your trash. He only wants the best. Leviticus 22:21. And whoever offers a sacrifice of peace offering to the Lord, to make a special vow to the Lord, or for a freewill offering from the herd or from the flock, must bring what is perfect to be accepted. There shall be no blemish in it. 22:22. Animals blind or made infirm and weak or maimed, or have sores or a wen or an itch or scabs, you shall not offer to the Lord, or make an offering of them by fire upon the altar to the Lord. Now we have a little bit on the peace offering and the vow offering, the animals that are to be used, and of course without blemishes, and of course it lists some of the blemishes here, so that's kind of neat to see that in written form. Leviticus 22:23. For a freewill offering you may offer either a bull or a lamb which has some part too long or too short, but for the payment of a vow it shall not be accepted. So the free will offering is an offering made to the Lord that is to be given freely. Hence the name free will offering. Oftentimes it's just a financial giving money to the Lord, to the temple. But in the case of an animal, that they could give an animal that would not be in good enough condition to be offered as a sacrifice to the Lord, but the animal could be given to the temple, and then the priest, maybe he's going to redeem the animal and keep it for his own use or whatever, or sell it. That it's just a transaction in that respect, and that the animal is not going to be sacrificed and offered to the Lord. That it could be consumed for its meat or something, but it wouldn't be one that would be offered to the Lord on the burnt altar. So it's just a way of giving to the Lord some of the things that may have a little bit of blemish in them, but it's a little different. It's more of giving a value rather than an offering of an animal. And we have the second part here with this vow offering, and that due to the blemishes, absolutely not acceptable. So, and that's just because the way that the offering is being made is drastically different. That the animal is sacrificed to the Lord, and he receives it as an offering. And he is kind of witness to whatever the vow is that is being made. The overseer, so to say. Leviticus 22:24. You shall not offer to the Lord any animal which has its testicles bruised or crushed, or broken or cut, neither sacrifice it in your land. So the restriction here is on the animals that have been castrated. And this list of things here are the methods in which they would have been castrated. And as a result, they're not fit for being offerings made to the Lord. And this type of castration was quite popular or quite common, and it's probably still quite common today. An ox is a castrated male cow, for instance, and there's other animals that we do this to as well. Even domestic cats and dogs, it's quite common as well. So it's something that has a benefit when it comes to animal husbandry. And it's common today, and it's common back then. It's just the way we do it today is a little bit more sophisticated and more expensive. Leviticus 22:25. Neither shall you offer as the bread of your God any such animal obtained from a foreigner who may wish to pay respects to the true God, because their defects render them unfit. There is a blemish in them. They will not be accepted for you. Generally, I think God only really wanted offerings made from the Israelites, from their own flocks, and not from flocks from other lands. But it could also be that there was foreigners that had animals for sale, and they would have given the Israelites a really good deal on them. And this was almost a way of discouraging the Israelites from buying these faulty goods, for they cannot be offered to the Lord. And because they have defects in them or whatever, it would breed into future generations and could cause problems down the road. So this was just kind of a way of preventing that from occurring to some degree. Seeing how this line follows the previous one, there's a good chance too that the foreigners would often deal in animals that maybe they were fine mostly, but they were probably castrated, and that would be problematic for the Israelites, for that would be a very severe blemish. Leviticus 22:26. And the Lord said to Moses. 22:27. When a bull or a sheep or a goat is born, it shall remain for 7 days with its mother, and from the 8th day on it shall be accepted for an offering made by fire to the Lord. 22:28. And whether the mother is a cow or a ewe, you shall not kill her and her young both in 1 day. So here we have changing gears yet again. Every time you see that line, and the Lord said to Moses, here comes some rules. So we have the idea that the animal, it can't be sacrificed within the first 7 days of its life, that it can only go on its eighth. That doesn't mean that that's just how they did things, that, oh, it's 8 days old, time to sacrifice it. For as we've looked through the Old Testament, we've seen a wide variety in ages, typically within a year or around a year old. But maybe for whatever instance, that this is like the absolute minimum, be that as it may. Now we get into the idea too that God doesn't want them to sacrifice the mother and the child on the same day. He sees something important in the generations and in the family dynamic in that respect. Just as we saw in the previous chapter, God didn't want a man to marry a woman and her daughter, and there was the death penalty for that one, and then they get burned afterwards, so pretty severe. Leviticus 22:29. And when you sacrifice an offering of thanksgiving to the Lord, sacrifice it so that you may be accepted. So God has all these rules and regulations around these sacrifices, and this line here, following up the previous one, is suggesting that, if they don't do this, the sacrifice won't be accepted. It will be rendered void, and that would be unfortunate. So follow the rules. Leviticus 22:30. It shall be eaten on the same day. You shall leave none of it until the next day. I am the Lord. 22:31. So shall you heartily accept my commandments and conform your life and conduct to them. I am the Lord. This is just kind of a conclusion to this whole thought and this idea that, they got to offer the offerings in the right way, and they need to be consumed properly as well. And that if all the things are done right, then it shall be acceptable to the Lord. And that's a good thing. Leviticus 22:32. Neither shall you profane my holy name, applying it to an idol, or treating it with irreverence or contempt, or as a byword. But I will be hallowed among the Israelites. I am the Lord, who consecrates and makes you holy. 22:33. Who brought you out of the land of Egypt to be your God? I am the Lord. So this is the conclusion to the chapter, and God has delivered them from Egypt and brought them out here. And as a result, he expects them to follow his commandments and his rules, and to do well, and not to profane his name, and be holy. And these are all good things.